All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Biblical Hitman. I'm your host, Steven. I'm here with Jesse. Joining us for the first time is John Adolfi. John is the founder of the museum in Phoenix, New York, called the Lost World Museum. Just with that title alone, we're going to get into some awesome things. He's also got a YouTube channel, Lost World Museum. You can check him out as well. These things will be in the description below, and his channel will also be in the title for this episode. Folks, if it's your first time here, or if you're returning, to help the show, please hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, leave a comment down below as well. We want to hear your thoughts about the topics that we get into with this episode. Big news, folks. We've transferred our host with audio. So we are now on Spreaker as our host for audio platforms. We're obviously still on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much where you can find all podcast episodes and platforms. So check us out there. While you're there, leave us a follow, leave us a 5-star review. Definitely helps the the channel, helps everything flow, helps us put us out there in leaderboards and all that kind of stuff. But John, brother, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on. I remember I came across your content through YouTube, TikTok. Everything just kind of hit me all at once, which was pretty awesome. I was totally ignorant to the Lost World Museum. I didn't know who you were. You've got a pretty big follower base, I see. Yeah, it's
On some of
amazing.
the platforms we do, on TikTok, we got nearly 1 million. And YouTube, we had about 100,000. And then I switched over to Facebook and that's where I do almost everything now. I mean, and any residual goes to the other platforms, but Facebook we just crested 240,000 today. So
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Wow, it's
thank you.
growing. It's growing. Yeah. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and where the audience can find you.
Sure. So, if you want we have a Linktree account on our website. So if you go to lostworldmuseum.com, everything's there. Our store, sign up for our newsletter. And our newsletters are cool, by the way. They're not dumb. And you will not be disappointed if you do decide to join that group. Mainly on Facebook. We have a Facebook group page and broadcast channel and subscriber, all four of those. We're also, yes, on YouTube. So the purpose of the museum, its theme is to answer the provocative and important question: where do we come from? Apes, aliens, or Adam? Just like that.
Wow. I mean, that alone makes me think of a bunch of things.
Well, we purposely did that because some people that we want to enter the conversation with may not really have an opinion so much as they've heard some things, and they heard about the Anunnaki, and they've heard about UFOs now, and Bigfoot and flat Earth and all, a lot of things out there that are becoming quite popular and garnering the attention of people. Maybe they went to college and they became dyed-in-the-wool evolutionists, but not necessarily so dyed-in-the-wool that they're not willing to, consider some other things. My contention is that we've heard about aliens, we've heard the Von Däniken theory and Chariots of the Gods, where aliens somehow interfaced with us and brought us out of the cave, gave us technology when we were ready, and then split, and then we lost that technology. That's the idea behind that. And the evolution theory has, a lot of different splinter groups that are more minority but still follow the, like they call it, the Younger Dryas, where there supposedly was a great cataclysm 12,000 years ago. That still follows the idea of evolution, just that there was a much older civilization that was highly advanced, that has been wiped out or forgotten, and they're trying so hard to bring recognition back and put a face on some of these incredible edifices that were built so long ago, a lot of the megalithic sites. And so there's that. But the Adam theory, as we characterize it as, is what is called a young earth creationist. And all that means is that the original granite and original rock that this earth had could be, 4.5 billion years ago or old, Could be 10,000 years old. It could be 1,000,000,000,000 years old. They thought that the universe back in the 1920s, before they came to some other calculations, their thought was maybe it is 1,000,000,000,000 years old originally. But life on Earth, life on Earth is 6 to 10,000 years old. And the worldwide flood of Noah is the reason why we see all these fossils and layers in the sedimentary rock strata. The other difference that we add to that whole scenario that some creationists don't is that we were the ones originally that were so far advanced because we were the original. Adam and Eve and those who came after them were the original people, more than twice as tall. Dr. Carl Boss said that their IQ, working back from where we are genetically, was probably somewhere in the 400 to 700 IQ, which means that when we look at the savants and prodigies, we get a sliver, a taste of what perhaps an antediluvian mind was capable of, never having to write anything down. And for 800 years, they could study everything from the laboratories of nature to architecture, whatever. And when Noah and his family got on board the ark, and when they dispersed, that dispersion from Babel, a few hundred years later, is the reason why you see so much commonality in legends and also in architecture throughout the world. And that's how we explain it.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lost piece of history that a lot of people don't like to get in. I think it's not really part of the mainstream science,
No.
spectrum.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there, Graham Hancock and all these other people that are working with their entire life spending pretty much to try and figure out what this period of time looked like, who was involved in it. There's a lot of speculation, right, that goes into a lot of these
Absolutely.
things. I definitely think we are in a de-evolution, where we came from something that we were at such a high pedestal of, both consciousness and technology and all this kind of stuff, and where we're at today. The mainstream likes to reverse that in a way to go, we're more advanced where we're at now than we were back in prehistoric times, the whole
Yeah.
hunter-gatherer idea and all that kind of stuff. I just really don't think that plays in effect with the antediluvian times, especially with all these ancient stories, especially in the Babylonian period. You've got it's undeniable evidence at this point that all the cultures have written about these same ideas. That people came from the sky, gave us knowledge, or increased it, or taught us how to create, more technological advanced things, weaponry, this, that, whatever. And I even think too that, all of these ancient architectural sites, Egypt, the pyramids, all this kind of stuff, the ziggurats, all that stuff had to do with a very widespread understanding of geometry,
Yeah.
and the aligning with the stars and all that kind of stuff. So, but let's dig in. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
What do you think? Those times were like, and you can start wherever you feel the need to.
Sure. You know, Babel was the central city, a massive city. They were building this edifice to themselves and, looking for people to worship them, the ones who were in charge. And they were building this thing. One theory is that they built it so high because they wanted to see the nature of the flood. They were still reeling from the flood, even though they didn't live through it. And they were weary of it ever happening again. They didn't want to believe the rainbow of promise idea that God had said in Genesis. So, as good pagans who probably still had a knowledge of God that rejected him, and started to substitute their own, carnal pagan religions and whatnot, they were still very, very scared, cautious about another worldwide flood happening. I mean, we're only talking a couple hundred years, a generation, if that at all. I mean, Noah lived 350 years after the flood. He saw Babel. If he was there, he could have seen it. And also, too, Shem, who was on the boat, who saw what the technology was and what the people were like. He was 100 years old when he got on the boat, and he lived for another 500 years afterwards. So, we sometimes don't think about who was around and what access to what information was available. And so I think we really underrate and underestimate what we were like, not only before the flood, but even after the flood. We retained longevity for 6 generations until it really dumbed down. I think our height dumbed down very quickly, like our age. And it wasn't, our environment was not predicated or did not support giantism. We see that in the animal record. We see the animals dumbing down in size. I mean, there were dragonflies in the fossil record with 26-inch wingspans. See, so we don't see that anymore.
Why do you think why do you think that is, that the dumbing down?
Sure. So one of the things that even evolutionary science, in Discover magazine, there's a couple other journals that did this. They wanted to test and see what the oxygen was in ancient air. So they went to amber, and amber has all those little creatures that are preserved in it, and amber is nothing more than fossilized tree sap. Well, from the creationist standpoint, that all took place during or shortly after the worldwide flood. Whatever was captured in there, both air, and there's air sacs in there, there's little bubbles. And so what they did was they crushed them and sucked it in and tested it to see what kind of oxygen levels were in the ancient air. They would say 30 million years ago. Okay, that's about where they put those pieces of amber. I would say 4,400 years ago. But this was antediluvian air. And what they found is instead of 21% oxygen as we have today, the oxygen levels were anywhere between 25 to 35%, considerably higher than what we have today. Not enough to be anywhere near to be toxic, but just enough to be able to give more oxygen for those large insects to be able to breathe. And some of those nostrils that were so small in some of these animals to be able to breathe. But afterwards, that hyperbaric too, the hyperbaric chambers, maybe you're familiar with, our atmospheric pressure, they think, was at least 1.5 to 2 times what it is today. And anytime you have elevated oxygen and hyperbaric increase of pressure, you see healings like you've never seen before in those chambers.
Right. We see this with, Jesse, you probably know about this, but UFC fighters, sometimes after their fights, they'll go into these hyperbaric chambers to try and, heal and recuperate after getting beat up for
Yeah.
20 minutes.
That's a real thing. Ilya Taporia, champion of the featherweight division, is a big proponent. He has one in his house. So, yeah.
Used to be rare. I remember seeing football players spending hours in it and trying to extend their career. And now it's become, although you don't hear a lot about it, but if you piece it together with those things you hear, like you just mentioned, there's a lot more athletes who are taking notice and actually doing it than we realize.
Yeah, I think with the cataclysm of the flood, I think there was other things obviously that came with the flood. Um, I think there was, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, all kinds of things that took place like that. And it could have changed something to do with the magnetic field around the earth or
It did.
whatever. It could have done something to the atmosphere, the pressure of it, all that kind of stuff. But
Also, too, you've got to remember that we had perfect soil up until the flood. The nutrients were perfect. And whenever you increase the nutrients, you reduce disease, and you have vegetables, let's just say, that are power packed. All you got to do is look at the Hunzas over there in the Himalayas, Pakistani area, and those guys were living way past 100 years without any issue whatsoever. They didn't die. They died in their sleep, but we're talking 3 feet of cultivated topsoil that they were meticulous about creating over the course of generations, and their food is like superfood because of it. They have no diseases, none.
Yeah, the Gershon Institute is a German guy that came over and kind of passed down a cancer treatment facility to his daughter. I think they did a documentary called Food Matters. I think she's passed on since, but she talks about how all of our vegetables that are grown now have literally zero nutrients. There's zero, and I'm sure if you have the right soil the right microbiome in the soil,
Micronutrients, exactly. Yeah.
micronutrients, then yeah, you can grow some good vegetables, but it's far and few between with mass producing with what we have today.
Gotcha. Wow.
So,
Wow.
you
That's
take that and and like you said, the UVA rays, UVB rays, gamma rays, all those are able to get through the atmosphere where they weren't before. Some, not both of the UV rays, but the UVB rays, which are the harmful ones. All those things, gamma rays and X rays, and all those hit us now, and they didn't before. So you got a lot of things all happening at the same time. And if you look at the biblical record of the ages, it goes from 950 to 600 with Shem, but the first generation, even after that, is 400, 400, 200, 200, and then 175, 120, 130.
right. Right.
Yeah,
Seems like a de-evolution kind of,
yeah,
where it's some part of the DNA strand to where from what we came from to where we're at now. I think sin has a lot to do with that. The curse, whatever it is.
yeah.
Wait,
Uh,
Stevie, you're telling me they didn't cap the telomeres?
what is a telemeter?
Telomere. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's in your body, and the length of a telomere predicts the length of
Oh,
your
right,
life.
right, right.
And Billy
It comes
Carson
with
thing
cell
where he talks
division.
the Anunnaki stuff, where he talks about the Anunnaki capped our telomeres, so we didn't live
Gotcha.
long. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Interesting.
It's
Interesting.
interesting though that we started off at 900 some odd years old, and let's just say, if I'm correct, more than twice as tall, and with vitality that is off the record and intelligence that's off the charts. Because, like to your point, Jesse, if you have environmental, if you have sin that's infected the environment, including the worldwide flood, and then you have ethical, moral, issues along the way, and eating that is not good, and you combine that, we're 130 generations into this since Adam. And each generation, there's some form of 1%, I guess. And I'm not a physicist. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a geneticist. But going from what Dr. Baugh said, there's a 1% degradation. So if we didn't start off like that, and we started off at 6 feet at 75 years, I don't know if we would have survived 6,000 years of all this that we've sustained. We may have burned out if we hadn't started with a more robust version of ourselves.
Right, right. Now I remember I sent Jesse a video. This had to be one of your TikTok videos. You took a video of what it looked like to be Adam's hand, the buildup of the size of what Adam could have been. I mean, I think this plays into what we're talking
Dude,
about.
that blew me
Yeah.
away. I was so happy when I saw that video. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This is awesome."
Yeah, I think everything was just bigger. Everything was bigger, better, more fruitful. Life was, just incredible. Obviously, we know the atmosphere kind of had a lot to do with that kind of stuff, but thinking of it, I think the buildup of our bodies now, the size of what it is, I think it has. I look at things in a symmetrical fashion, to where the oxygen level that we have now is compatible with our size, right? And if the oxygen level was greater back then, it would have to only be compatible to sustain life with a certain size, right? But so break that down for me, John. What
Well,
was
I got something even better.
okay?
Dr. Carl Baugh from the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, aligns with what we're talking about here. But he's 5 times smarter than I'll ever think to be. I mean, he's brilliant. And he's a nice man too. And he has been experimenting with hyperbaric chambers for I don't know how many years, how many decades. He purchased some kind of unit, I think it was a feed tower from a farm, 8 feet tall, 60 feet long, and he's got it in his museum, and he's converting it to a gigantic hyperbaric chamber. He almost has it done, and let me tell you this: it's going to be able to alter the atmospheric pressure. I'm not sure what he's doing on the oxygen or not, but interestingly enough, to one of your gentlemen's point here, he is altering the electromagnetic field inside of it to replicate what they believe it was before the flood. Then they're going to put insects, animals, things inside of it. They're going to hatch things inside of it. And in his words, to see what the genetic potential that organism actually has. It's like, ooh, I get goosebumps thinking about this. This is like science fiction, but it's true and it's cool.
Yeah, it's getting more weirder by the day, man. And what's so funny behind all this kind of stuff, I mean, there's even scientists out there that explore and experiment with the same kind of things, just with like making chimeras or, gene splicing things, growing things, lasting them for 14 days.
The homunculus, right?
in
We just
in
had
a
one on
petri
one.
dish. Yeah, it seems like man is becoming more experimental with this gene,
Yeah.
just the science of genetics. It makes me think like maybe we're entering the times of the days of Noah.
Mm.
Who knows? But it seems like also the ethical side of things is the restrainer on that is becoming lesser and lesser and lesser over time, because I think man wants to be God at some point, or they can't be God, but obviously they want to be able to do things like that. Um, but what are your thoughts on like the Nephilim back in those days, and
Yeah, I have a completely different take on it, and everybody hates me for it.
no, that's okay. I want to hear.
That's fine. And the thing is that the idea that Nephilim were human angel hybrids is something that is supported by the Talmud and a lot of ancient, authors. And the Book of Enoch is one of the more famous of them that supports this idea. And I don't buy it. I believe that the daughters of men were nothing more than just carnal Cain, Cain inspired, the lineage of Cain,
Right,
who
right.
did what Delilah did to Samson. And that is that those people that kept themselves separate, as soon as you bring together two people that are mixed in religious beliefs, usually the one that's the Christian gets dumbed down to the pagan or the non-believer. That's usually what happens. Not all the time, but that's usually. And so the sons of God, sons of God can be one of three things. It can be an angel. It can be Adam before the fall. He was considered a son of God. So a righteous man without a carnal nature. And a son of God can also be a carnal individual that has had a transformation, who now is adopted as a son of God back into the fold. Anytime somebody goes through a conversion, is considered a son of God. Now, Jesus had both son of man and son of God in him. So he was 100% God, but he took upon his sinless nature, our sinful nature, and he became the son of man. It's the same thing as Genesis. Daughters of men would be the son of man equivalent, and sons of God would be the equivalent of him in his unfallen state, and them in their righteous state with a carnal nature, but converted and maintaining the law of God and the grace and the love and the basically the. So you put those two together, what happens? The image of God gets defaced, and then you run it into exactly what happened. Only 8 people would be willing at the final moment to get on board Noah's Ark. There was a distinct call, just like at the very end of time. There's going to be a distinct call, and it says that the door was shut by God, so no man could open it. There's going to be in Revelation, it talks about a door that's going to be shut by God, which means that everybody's decision here on earth is going to come to a point, to an end. So there will be a place to where the warning goes out, just like in Noah, and then everybody's going to make a decision, and then probation, if you want to call it that, ends. And then some things happen, and then Christ returns. What was the question again?
No, you
Oh, the
pretty much.
sons of God. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's too many questions, weird questions, when you start to say that they're angelic beings. Look, I maintain that we were more than twice as tall before the flood, just like the animal kingdom, just like a lot of the plants, that we were large. The Nephilim were just either a description of just a description of us with a little bit of maybe take on some of the ones that were a little bit naughty or not. But you see the same thing happen in Canaan. And Canaan are nothing more than those giants that they walked in there and said, we look like grasshoppers. They're nothing more than throwbacks. They just like the people who lived a little longer, than some people did, Goliath and everything, they're 1000 BC. That's like 1400 years after the flood. But though that family still maintained giantism. The conquistadors came over here in the 1500s, and they reported seeing at least one, if not a few, Native Americans that were 11 feet tall and extraordinarily strong. So all those legends of giants is not like leprechauns. All those legends of giants and those who built the megalithic sites throughout the world, every single one of them that I've come across, there's usually in the explanation of who did it, there will be some insert of giants. I mean, when the Spanish came over to South America, Central America, and saw the edifices for the first time, do you know what? And the Spanish are no slouches when it comes to working with stone. They knew how to work with stone because that's what they did when they built. And they built all those Catholic monasteries and churches in Peru and whatnot with a lot of the stone that they grabbed from those edifices. But their first initial reaction to it was either magic or giants that created those cyclopean buildings.
Wow. Dude, this is cool, man, because I haven't heard this perspective yet, and I respect you for that. And this is I don't think really there's a show out there that we, out there in the podcast world that we have here, because we bring on different people, different perspectives and stuff, and it's really great because everything's on the table. We sort things out together, we talk about it, and I haven't heard this side of it, but it does make sense to me. I can see that, that the sons and daughter, or the sons of God, the lineage of Cain, right? We see that there's the Setite lineage versus Cain, all that kind of stuff. If people were bigger back then, it
That's the
totally.
idea.
Right. Well, yeah, and I could, I
And
it,
does
it,
it
it,
does the
it
evidence around it support it? I mean, granted, we don't have a lot of corroborating evidence. If you want to go with the idea that the Smithsonian has covered up a lot of that back in the 18 and early 1900s, there's a whole book on that subject. Giants of Noah's Ark is anathema to the evolutionary community, and the Smithsonian knew this. In the 1860s, 70s, they knew that anything like that is just like a no-go.
Why do you
Right.
think it's a no-go? Why do you think they tried to hide it?
Because both of those tend to prove or support the biblical account. Today, this idea that Nephilim were some special breed of people, that's not, I could be wrong, but that was not the culture in the Christian world back in the, let's say, 1860s. And when you heard about a giant being found, they knew that meant Genesis. They knew it was the people before the flood as a whole. Let me give you a case in point. Have you ever heard of the Cardiff Giant?
No,
Possibly.
can't say that I have.
Okay. Cardiff, New York is just 20 minutes below Syracuse.
Mm.
And there was a farmer who had some gentlemen in 69, dig some wells, and they hit something a few feet down. And they cleared the area, and they found this 10-foot to what appeared to be a petrified man. And they brought it out of the ground and they started charging to see it, and they made quite a bit of money. Okay, what you don't know, and they only found this out later on, is there was a man who hated Christianity, hated it.
Mm.
He went to Iowa, and he went to the gypsum companies there in Fort Dodge, and he said, give me a slab of this, I need it. And everybody turned him away. They didn't like him. They didn't trust him. He had to go south, and he finally got somebody to sell him like a 12-foot piece. And then he brought it to someone who he had carved this, ended up being a 10-foot man. He was going to have it a little larger. And they spent some time doing this. I mean, they put it in an acid bath. I mean, this thing weighed a couple, several tons. He puts it on a cart and he brings it all the way to Binghamton and then up into Syracuse. And a year before they discovered it, he buries it on this farm, his friend's farm. Here's the reason why he did this. He wanted the public to get fooled. He wanted to fool the Christians. He thought that the Christians would immediately identify that that was an antediluvian, and they would say, there's proof of the Bible. And it would just be this coming together of all Christians that would say, here it is, world. And then he would walk in and say, ha ha, idiot. What's interesting is that that's how he believed they were interpreting that and how they would, but that's not what happened.
Interesting.
Some thought it was a Native American idol. Some thought it was a man, antediluvian man, and there was a couple other theories. People were split on it, but he was betting on people in the 1860s to see a 10-foot petrified man and to immediately identify it with the entire society of the pre-flood world.
Wow. Yeah.
We don't do that today. We go, oh no, that's an angel human hybrid.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Doesn't anybody
Right.
that believes that ever bring up the negatives to that, the questions that come up, and try to
Right. Try to navigate through the information, right?
Nobody tries to disprove it at all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I
Now,
mean,
what do you think about dinosaur bones? Do you have any irregular takes? I know there's a lot of people in the
Sure.
Christian community that believe that a lot of these dinosaur bones aren't really dinosaurs and they're giant Nephilim.
Oh, yeah. No, they're dinosaur bones. I have no problem
Okay.
with that.
There you go.
Identifying bones is a real specialty, though, and if there's more than just one bone, you can start to begin to piece it together. I was talking to a paleontologist, creationist today, and I was asking him, what about giant armadillo vertebrae? He says, John, watch out when you're buying individual vertebrae. He says, I had one vertebrae one time when two paleontologists said it was from two different animals. He says, it's hard to identify sometimes some of these things. The only thing that we have as far as evidence from the flood of giant humans is once in a while there will be a report of a giant human footprint. There were several sets in the Paluxy River in Glen Rose, along with the dinosaur tracks in the same strata. And we went and republished 2 books and even got the original photographs from the daughter of the man who took them for his book. And we republished it with the original slides put in there so you could see it really much more clearly.
Wow, I'm gonna have to check
Valley
that
of the
out.
Valley of the Giants, and giant man tracks. And these tracks are anywhere between 17 to 21 and a half inches long. The criticism is that it's a dinosaur track that's been altered. It's been eroded, and it looks like a long, skinny human footprint when in fact it's a dinosaur print.
Oh, wow.
But
Interesting.
you see a theropod, a dinosaur with 3 toes, right next to it or real near it. There's no erosion whatsoever on those. Nobody's ever brought that up. I don't know why, but
Have you seen the sorry to interrupt you. Have you
No,
seen
go
the
ahead.
giant, they call it the foot of God in Africa, and it's
Probably
sitting.
correct. I
What's
saw
that?
that. I think
What do you what do you think about that?
Yeah, there's limits to it. I wouldn't say that anyone was any more than 15 feet tall. And if you do, then you've got something maybe approaching that footprint. My calculations is a 10-foot to 12-foot person, you've got about a 24-inch foot. You get another 3 feet on top of that. Maybe you've got a 30-inch foot, maybe approaching 36 inches. And I think
Right.
this is just my own personal opinion.
Right. And
So-
this foot has been claimed to be, I think it's like 3 feet or 3.5 feet long. And
Right.
it's sitting, and it looks like it's sitting on like a tectonic plate or a piece of ground that was kind of pushed up like this.
Right.
It's very interesting. I
It
saw
could
that.
be. I'm not going to
Yeah.
dismiss it entirely. I
Right.
honestly don't. But when you see those footprints, and I've seen them in the Paluxy River, we were there when it was dry. It was all dried up. And I finally got to the place to where they were, and we started cleaning some of them out. And I saw the tracks. Now, granted, there's no like toe imprints. You can't see that. Apparently, some of them have been eroded and some have been destroyed by a paleontologist that's down there that hates what Carl Baugh does. And that's only hearsay, but it looked like he did, 2 of them. And I spoke to the girl who was there in the 70s, and Beverly Burrill. And Burrill, Mr. Burrill is the one who did the book Giant Man Tracks, which, anyway, she saw them as a teenager. And she said, John, I saw the prints. There was no mistaking it, that it was a footprint, a human footprint. And I went, interesting. They say they've been debunked. Well, a whole generation hasn't seen it for themselves to see that it's been debunked or not. So we published the book just so people could look at the evidence for themselves.
What do you think the times were like with these dinosaurs walking the earth? Do you think also there was a cataclysm that happened that ended their lifespan?
Sure. So I believe that all dinosaurs died in the worldwide flood. Some survived that maybe either were laid to rest entirely because of the new generation that was about to take place, and that they would be a little bit overwhelming for us. This is just my own theories on it. It's possible that some of these dinosaurs could have been amalgamated, that the smartest people in the entire universe, with 800 years of being able to study everything science-wise with an evil carnal nature, could have done some crossbreeding. I wouldn't put it past them, and those would have been laid to rest. It's funny how they look like they're ready for war. Some of them, like the Triceratops and stuff. You look at the Stegosaurus with that club on the end of his tail.
Right.
It may not be. I'm just saying, though, it looks like it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, well, some of the brontosaurus-like creatures, the brontosaurus or the brachiosaurus, as they call it today, there's been evidence of dragons or brontosaurus-like creatures, whether if the Loch Ness is true or not, or Lake Champlain true or not, or the other ones in some of the other lakes throughout the world. And in some of the artwork from the 13, 14, 15, 1600s, every once in a while you'll see something pop up that looks similar to that. I think that they dumbed down in size and they survived for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thought. That's just
common sense, really. I mean, if you think about it, all the ones that couldn't swim didn't make it. You look at alligators, crocodiles, and other supposed prehistoric animals that still live today. And well, guess what? They live in the water.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there is this thought of like the Younger Dryas impact theory. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
A little bit.
Yeah, that there was an asteroid that hit somewhere where, I mean, Jesse, where was it? It hit somewhere in Oregon?
Arizona.
It
might be Oregon too. I think there was multiple.
Like Canada area up there or whatever. But it kind of, they say, I think there's a lot of theories with it that say that this is what took us out of the Ice Age, and this is what caused the flood because of the heated material melting all the glaciers and the ice blocks and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Well, according to the young Earth creationism theory, the conditions were just right as far as, what is it, cold air, warm seas, whatever. I don't have it down, but that the Ice Age was created a couple hundred years after the flood, lasted for a couple hundred years, and then dissipated. And what's interesting is that both evolutionists and creationists can agree that when the ice for the Ice Age melted, it rose the oceans about 300 feet. Now, what's interesting is, and anyone who's watching this, you can go to your computer and take a look at the outline of the shoreline, and that area that's what am I trying to say? That area that's underwater, that's the old beach.
Not the Mariana Trench, right?
Not the trench, but that hugs all the continent.
The coast, right?
You talking about Appalachia, Appalachian Mountains?
No, I'm talking about that's in the ocean. That's about 300 feet down. Sorry, I know what it is, and it's just not coming to me right at the moment. But that was the original beach. So after the flood, when you see that area that's right off the coast of XYZ, you lower it down 300 feet to where we have that original beach. Not only are there pathways to get to like Australia, so much easier,
Right, right.
but there are cities or parts of megalithic things that are underwater.
Right. The Bimini Road, right?
There you go. Now, here's how you can test whether or not when that happened. The archaeologists, paleontologists, whatever geologists will tell you that it happened 10,000 years ago. Creationists will say that that happened approximately 4,000 years ago. Well, 10,000 years ago, there were no megalithic sites, but 4,000 years ago, there was. And they wouldn't have built it unless it was dry land. And we're talking some, every time you see something, 10 feet to 300 feet underwater around the coast of whatever continent, that was built or developed prior to the Ice Age melting.
Right, and it's where most civilization would be because,
Sure.
it's just like today. Most of the population of anywhere around the world is around the coastlines.
Yeah.
You need water to survive.
Yep.
Plus, water powers a bunch of other pieces of technology that we use today. But yeah, and if you go on, Google Maps, or if you go on, Google Earth, you can zoom out and you can still see that the areas that you're talking about, where you go 300 feet off the coastline, you could see like the shape, because I'm from Florida. You could see the old shape of Florida, and then the waters obviously, were brought back up, right? I think that's something that has to do with the flood. What do you
I
think
think
that
the Bimini Road is on one of the more ancient maps that got their information from even
really?
more ancient maps.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Huh.
So that
That's a
was
fascinating
exposed.
topic, those ancient maps, for
Yeah.
sure. And it's like you said, even what's that strait that's connects Alaska to Russia?
Yeah. The Bering
What's the
Strait.
the Bering Strait, right? Things like that. Um, and even Graham Hancock has done a lot of exploration. I don't, are you familiar with him,
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Hancock, right? So
Yeah.
he's done a lot of underwater exploration down there, and you could see that there's these big structures that
Yeah.
show like that there's 90-degree cuts and all this kind of stuff, big
Off
rocks
Japan.
stacked on.
Yeah, they've got that there.
Yeah, it's wild. It really is. Why do you think a lot of this information is not mainstream? Obviously, we know it.
They have a hard time placing some of these things. It's better to ignore it than to address it. And Graham
Interesting.
Hancock is he's placing this. This is the reason why, one of the reasons or proofs that there was a civilization a lot longer ago, because he's still under the impression that the Ice Age took place 10,000 or so years ago. So that would place these civilizations at 11, 12,000 years ago. And granted, the timeline for the young Earth creation is short, and it does seem to pose problems. But this makes sense in the sense that if there was a Tower of Babel, there was a flood in the Tower of Babel, and it happened 4,400 years ago, and let's say the Ice Age 4,000 years ago. And we see megalithic construction, which is the oldest construction, off the coast. And we see it now underwater 300 feet. We know that that was caused by the melting of the Ice Age. Was the Ice Age, according to creationism, Ice Age is 4,000 years ago. Evolution, 10,000 years ago. And that's a reason why he feels in one respect of why civilization is much older, because he believes in the timetable of the climatologist and geologist that it happened 10,000.
Right, right, right. What are your thoughts with the technology back in those days, antediluvian period?
Nobody really knows. The speculation starts with how smart were they, and when you look at the savants and prodigies and realize that you can memorize things and hold it forever, and you start to piece together what the mind was possibly like. And if Carl Baugh is even half right about IQs for the average individual being 2 to 400, let alone 400 to 700. What do you do with it? What does it even look like to have a 400 or a 300 IQ to the average individual? And then have all these other amazing abilities. You start with that, and then you ask yourself, what can you accomplish, good or bad, in 800 years? I mean,
Right.
I'm
I
glad
know.
that God shortened our life, you know? Could you imagine for 800 years and being able to have free reign to do his ideas?
That's a good point. That's a
No,
good
it,
point. I mean,
it's
God's always got this counter move, right? In because he's the best at this whole strategy game between him and the devil. He's
yeah.
always got the best counter move. What are your thoughts with the knowledge that was in the garden? Do you think that there was like,
Okay.
yeah, break it down for me.
So Adam, when he was created, had language already preloaded. And so he was able to, with his, again, we'll just go with what Carl Boss says, with his 700 IQ and the preloaded language and various things preloaded, he was able to name all the animals and give them actual names that made sense, whatever they were at the time, very quickly. I mean, it was fast. um, no matter how smart you are or how not smart you are, the whole point of Adam and Eve before the fall was maintaining the integrity and the image of God, both in their countenance or the way they were designed, but especially in their characters. And that was the most important thing, you know. Even if you were able to genetically manipulate things with a carnal nature and start to go into the laboratory of Satan and start to mix things up, perhaps thorns and thistles were something that were a byproduct of his direction, for the bad people. And let's go ahead and do bad things. We see it here today. We see that, they have to put stops, at least try to, for some of these experiments because we just want to either create bigger bombs or do really weird genetic things because we can.
Right. Yeah.
So,
When man gets the hold of knowledge and technology, I don't really think it's a good outcome
No.
either way.
Look
It
yeah,
what they
never
look what
really is.
Google did. Google created that like general AI, and they had to shut it down right away because it was just a sentient being, pretty much, that was like starting to just immediately wanted to take over.
Yeah, and I even think when it knew it was going to be shut down, it was like trying to recreate itself on a whole nother like platform. So it's
Yep.
like trying to
Yep.
plant a
oh,
seed and grow itself somewhere else. I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we dealing with here? Just throw it all in the trash, please. Oh man. I have I'm reading this book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Have you heard of that title at all?
no, I
No.
haven't.
So it's interesting. It gets into a lot of uh speculation with pertaining to knowledge in the garden. It gets into a lot of traditions with uh, groups and societies that speak of these traditions, that a lot of their mysticism and all this kind of stuff came from the garden at some point. And it makes me think when you were talking about, Adam had this language. I feel like Adam had these had this software already kind of downloaded in a way. Obviously, yeah, you have to expand and learn these things as you go. But I think God was, walking with him, also teaching him things as well,
Sure.
as an agrarian, teaching him how to, take care of the vineyards, the crops, and the animals, and all this kind of stuff,
Quick
right? All
learner, I'm sure.
Yeah, all the nature around him. And this book, it gets into where after you know, Adam and Eve sinned and, the devil kind of messed everything up, that pretty much the same knowledge that was taught down to Abel and Cain, Cain took this knowledge and developed this whole kind of uh, paganistic mysticism, where you see pretty much all the ancient civilizations today, what they practiced, sacrifice, and all this other kind of stuff.
Sure.
Um, what are your thoughts on that, with secret societies nowadays, and with these things going on.
Well, it's interesting that a serpent was in the tree. The implication is that it had flight and probably very beautiful. And that's the reason why when God said on your belly, because you go around the world and some of the most ancient worship items or icons or images is winged serpents. You see it everywhere. If you look, you start to see it everywhere.
Yeah,
And
China's huge, right?
oh
Like, well,
yeah,
you know.
it's all over. It's in Egypt. It's in South America. It's everywhere. You see a pagan society, you will see winged serpents, ironically enough, because it existed at one time. And I think that's the reason why. And Lucifer is just, he's just, taking what was true and then just twisting it. Now, us today, we're kind of unbeknownst to that. It
Right, right. And he
doesn't have
was
to
the
be.
tree of knowledge, right? Knowledge of good and evil. And
Yeah,
obviously, I think Cain was misled at some point, with having retaliation and this rebellion that was in his heart towards God because of the blessings that were given to Abel and all this kind of stuff. And once he was casted out in the garden, he built cities, he had kids, he had a
that's right.
lineage, and so these things got passed down through to tradition, and I think it just became this big snake brotherhood type deal. Um,
You know, my only, my, I believe that Adam and Eve had robes of light, similar to what the angels had. And that's the reason why they weren't naked, so to speak. These depictions of them naked is like, no. Um, and there's one other thing that I'm maybe understanding to be perhaps true. I don't know. And that is when they went over to like a leaf, that there was some kind of communication between the created nature and them when they went to it, almost like it was communicating or teaching something about it as it relates to obviously God. And that's about as far as I can go, and I may be
yeah.
completely wrong about that.
Well, it's funny with what you're saying is kind of like what was portrayed in the movie Avatar. Are you familiar with that movie
Sure.
Avatar with the blue
Mm,
people and all
Yeah.
this?
they
Well,
connect to the, yep.
their tails connected into pretty much all the animals, and
Mm,
they were able to get this vibration from the plants, and to
Yep.
everything was a very peaceful Eden kind of at that point. It's so funny how all the movies kind of just replay the biblical insight of what kind of happened in their movies. Hollywood obviously does their twist on a lot of things, but I find that fascinating. I think that's true. I think that there was a different connection with man and nature, 100%.
yeah. Have you ever heard the old wives' tale where you take a seed of a fruit and you put it in your mouth and
No.
you let it sit there for a little while and you take it out of your mouth and you put it in the ground, and when it grows, it gives you all the nutrients that you're missing or what you
Oh,
need. It's an old wives' tale, and
no, I've
it's
not heard that one.
Well, it's funny
yeah.
because in the Bible, God says to eat the seeds as well, which is kind of
Mm.
interesting. It's funny,
Oh, yeah,
you know.
Well, lemon seeds are supposed to, I've heard lemon seeds are very nutritious, while other seeds like apples can have heavy arsenic.
that's
Mm,
true. And the
right,
Hunzas, they're
right.
big on apricot, big on
Yeah.
apricot seeds. Huge,
I
huge,
heard
huge.
that big cancer fight. I mean, everything very, very beneficial. I heard that last year, the year before, about apricot seeds
Yeah.
curing cancer.
Yes.
Interesting.
Wow.
And it is
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they want you to buy medicine, of course, and not do it naturally, right? But power to the people. I'm just kidding. So your museum.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit of what you got in there for the
sure.
public and all that kind of stuff.
In 2005, when we decided that we wanted to have a museum, I mean, I had this huge vision. And you got to understand, when you have a huge vision, you have to have huge amounts of money. And sometimes our visions are bigger than our pocketbook. And so we took it as far as we could for 5 years. I hooked up with a business strategic coach, and he said, I love your idea. He was a Christian. He is a Christian. And he said, I love your idea, but let's set it down for right now, and let's build your real estate practice so that we can come back to it with more resources. I said, that sounds like a brilliant idea. So from 2010 to about 2017, 18, I kind of lost interest in it, and I didn't do a whole lot with it. And I don't know if it was because I was so busy trying to follow what the coach was saying to get to that place again, or if it was just I don't know, just for a while there it just kind of waned a little bit. Then in 2018, I started to look at all the fragments and started cleaning everything up. And I was really getting excited about it again. I was cleaning up my files. I was trying to improve the website and whatnot. And in the process, I decided to take our picture window at my office, right next to my office, and do a window display like you would see at wintertime, with all those animatronic little figurines in Syracuse, And I thought, why don't we go ahead and do that? So I had this mastodon skull and I got some other supporting things about it and put a box outside where they could take info out and a little memorial, not memorial, but a souvenir card with information on it, and lit it up 24/7 with bars of LED lights. And so that was my representation of the physical museum until we had the means of being able to do something more. And then in 2020, somebody, it was actually Gary V. Maybe you guys know who he is.
Oh, yeah, yes. Gary V.
Gary V talked about TikTok, which I'd never heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started experimenting with real estate and with a kind of a little bit comedic. And then one day, a client of mine said, "Hey, John, you want to see something we dug up off the Jersey Shore?" I said, "Sure." And he hands me a mastodon tooth. And I said, "This is so cool." I whipped out my phone and I took a 20-second video. Continental shelf. That's what it's called.
That's okay. We went
Continental
back
shelf.
15 minutes later, folks.
Got
Go
it.
back 15 minutes.
And that's where he found it, in 150 feet of water in the continental shelf when they were dredging. So I shot this and then I threw it up on, I made a third account on TikTok, put that up there for the Lost World Museum, and I got about 600 views, and I went, I like this. So I deleted the other two accounts and I just started building the TikTok account. That's how it started online. And then we went over to, YouTube and then
cool.
more recently Facebook.
Pretty cool, man. Yeah, it's all successful, man. I'm really happy for you, man.
Thank
It really is cool. We're trying to build, a platform as well, and
Yep.
it's really hard nowadays.
It is.
It's tough. It's tough, but having people on like you and other people, it definitely helps grow. It gets the channel out there and things like
Absolutely.
that.
And if you send me the link, I'll blast it out to everybody that I can to.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome.
gotta ask
Definitely
you-
would do that.
I got to ask you this. What is your favorite artifact that you have in your museum?
I don't know. I just got one the other day that might be my favorite.
Oh,
Let me
wow,
think
okay.
here just for a second. It's a Gigantopithecus skull.
Wow.
It's huge.
What?
I
Wow.
just got it. It's like
Oh my goodness. Where is it
Really?
from? Where was it found?
they only found the teeth, 1,000 teeth in Vietnam and China, and they found 3 mandibles from here forward.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, they constructed the rest of it based on a gorilla.
Right.
But they knew what the size was based on jaw and teeth, and it's 10 feet tall. It's a 10-foot tall ape.
Wow.
If an
Could you
ape could be 10
imagine
feet
that?
tall, why can't a human be 10 or 11 feet tall?
Right,
That's, again,
right.
my contention.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So
But
so
you know what? You don't want to know. This is not my favorite, but let me show you one that I like. And I told you we'd show a few things, but let me just show you this one. Okay.
Absolutely.
This right here are 4 rocks, lava rocks. Okay. Here's a certificate of authenticity. Let me just read you what this says. This is to certify that the rock from Keupilihu, probably Hawaii, was dated by 3 independent groups. Test number 1. Scientists dated the rock using the potassium-argon method, 1 to 2.4 billion years. Okay? Test number 2. Scientists dated the same rock via helium radiometric method, and it came in at 140 to 670 million years. Test number 3. The islanders watched the rock form during an eruption in 1801.
Wow. That's hilarious.
Wow, that's
That's pretty
awesome.
funny.
I love that.
It's
I
got a
love that.
punchline. That's why I enjoy that
No,
one.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Well, this is the thing, man. We can even get into this. Like, I think there's a big issue with the testing and the grounds that kind of come behind that, and
Yeah,
and with the carbon dating and all of that, and the geometric layering, all of that kind of stuff is a little fishy to me. Some of it is kind of illogical at some point, but why is the science community pushing it so hard?
I don't know. They hold on to it very tightly, and they try to keep a tight rein on anyone who comes into their community. And if you don't think that's true, just watch the movie Expelled. Um, Expelled talks about and documents and asks the question almost very honestly, without pretension or without ulterior motive. If you're so right, why are you so angry? Why are teachers getting fired for just suggesting in their class that it might be intelligently designed? Why? Why? And he explores that. Ben Stein. Ben
Oh man,
Stein.
definitely have to check that out because that's the
Yeah,
one thing that's always bothered me the most about who's that guy, Flint Dibble. He went on Joe Rogan to debate Graham Hancock on the Bimini Road and other structures found,
right.
Göbekli Tepe, and I can't stand the arrogance. It drives me up the wall because it's obvious that some of this stuff is clearly not a natural formation. And it just
Right.
drives me crazy with that guy and other people in the community that are just that arrogant.
Yeah, they're dogmatic on pretty much everything.
Sure.
What was that movie called? What were you expelled?
Expelled. Yeah. So let me show you. You want to see a couple things?
Yeah, let's do
Absolutely.
All
it.
right.
Let's do it. Show and tell, please. When I'm up there, I got to definitely check out your museum. I want to go stop by there and
Does
oh,
that look Frankensteinish or what?
it
Yeah, what in the
does.
world is that?
That is a fossil maker. It is
What?
replicating the burial of material and organic material,
Oh,
both,
wow.
and with 1,500 pounds of psi pressure
Wow.
to replicate 5 to 10,000 feet of overburden on a organic thing like a leaf.
Wow.
And they press that in clay. And I'll show you what it looks like when you get done. And then you just put it in the oven for 12 hours and then I'll
Wow.
show you what comes out.
You have
So
yourself a fossil.
you take a leaf like this, you put it in there with clay, and then 12 hours later,
Hmm,
this is what happens. Now,
that's
some people
cool.
say, well, that's not a fossil. All right. Well, okay. He also put a squid in there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it.
Ah, yeah.
I see it.
Hmm.
It's kind of wild. How much is that? Or
The
was
fossil
that?
maker, $500. Comes
Mm.
in two sizes. I've got the smaller one. We're going to be selling these at some point. That's one thing that we're going to be adding to our store. Just
Nice.
not yet. I got to go through it and do it myself. I'm making the owner's manual, owner operator manual for it. We're about half done. So
Oh, okay. Pretty
So did
cool.
you create and patent that or what?
no, 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 no. There's
Okay.
another gentleman that came up with that, and we just stumbled upon each other
Hmm.
and have become friends. And he's fascinating. He's trying to figure out the formula for the flood as far as
Interesting.
fossilization. It's really cool.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
But heat is involved, right?
Heat is involved,
Heat is in.
450 degrees.
Wow.
Pretty
Okay.
cool. Pretty
Yep.
cool. Well,
So you put
talking.
this thing under
Go ahead.
pressure and then you put it in the oven and then you take it out, let it cool off, and then you open it up and you've got your clay matrix and up to 3 or 4 things, in little half-inch discs. You
Hmm.
stack them with things in between.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Talking about the flood, I wanted to switch right into this. So, do you guys have a replica in your museum for Noah's Ark?
I have a small one because we're this close.
Right.
So I have this one right here that I use.
Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. Cool. What are your thoughts with that? What are your thoughts with Noah's Ark? And do we know where it sits today?
Well, the best evidence that we have Okay. The best evidence that we have is that it is on top of Mount Ararat on the northeast side,
Mm.
right above the Ahura Gorge, and sitting in a valley,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and broken into two at this point.
Wow.
Snapped into two. It's in glacier most of the time, so it's hidden most of the time, but it's been preserved. And
Now, is that the same picture that's on YouTube or on Google? Not YouTube, but Google. If you just Google Noah's Ark, you can.
Are you talking about we're in Mount Ararat?
Mm-hmm.
Ararat, yeah. So Alfred Lee, who's a friend of mine, and he's an artist, and he's been to Mount Ararat 4 times, and he met this man by the name of George Agopian. George Agopian is an Armenian that lived at the base of the mountain with his uncle, and his uncle took him up there when he was 10 and 12 years old, back in 1902 and 1904.
I remember this story.
Yeah, and he stood on top of Noah's Ark, and then he
Wow.
went dark with that information because he came back to film. This is a fascinating story. He came back to film it in it's either 1916 or 1921. He got a friend, got a 16 millimeter camera, bunch of film, and they were going to go up and film it.
Can you lift that up just a smidge?
And what happened was they get there, and off the coast, I'm going to get Alfred to get me the story again. It's been many years. Off the coast, the Armenian is going on.
Oh, wow.
They're throwing people over the side of the ship,
With turkey
drowning
and
them.
wow.
So he whips out his camera and he starts filming that instead.
Oh,
He goes back to the United States, sets up like a press conference to show the movie. And he was AWOL from the Turkish army to begin with.
Ah.
And he spent some time in a Russian gulag when they caught him.
wow.
The Russians did. He spent some time in the gulag, and then when they released him, they said, "You got to go back to Turkey." And he said, "Okay." He said, "No way," and he went right to the United States. So he was dodging them,
Wow.
and now he does this, and some men show up and make it very clear to him that, and I think they confiscated his footage. I don't know if he showed it or not. I think he did, but that was the end of it, right there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Always
he went dark.
handlers.
Never told anybody he knew about Noah's Ark. Nothing. Until his realtor, he never married, his realtor, Mary Board, became close with him, and he told her that he stood on top of Noah's Ark. So when in 1969, when they went to find wood on on Ararat, it got out into the press, and Mary Board contacted the organization, the Search Foundation, and said, "Hey, I know somebody who's seen and stood on top of Noah's Ark." And so Alfred Lee went out to meet George Agopian. That was their first meeting right here. And that's a painting that Alfred did of Mount Ararat.
Wow.
They sat down, and over the course of 18 months, he gave his testimony to Alfred. Alfred kept asking him questions. Sometimes he said he was irritated, but I wanted to make sure that what I said and what he understood me to say, and the answer that he was giving me was crystal clear. He said, "I was the perfect person for this because I had experience in Vietnam. I grew up in the Orient. My father was a missionary to Korea. I spent 3 to 7 years, from his 3rd year to 7th year, in a Japanese prison camp during World War II. He says, I know the way the Oriental mind works. And when I was there with George Agopian, I was able to employ some of those ideas when I speak to him. And I have to speak to him a certain way to be able for him to really be able to understand and communicate back." And he said, "What does it look like?" And so he drew the memories of George Agopian right in front of him. And this is what it looked like.
Oh, wow.
Look at that, dude.
Wow.
Look at that. Built by one man, huh? My goodness.
That's
How
what
would you go
George
for
said
wood?
he saw. And there's a stairway. And it was done by the Pilgrims afterwards. And the reason why it was so high up is because the snow was that high. And
Right.
so when they built it so they could get on top, because they used to like to get on top, scrape some of the tar off of it, I guess, and whatever. But they built that, and that's That's Alfred. Alfred drew George's uncle. He piled a bunch of rocks, and then he lifted George to the first step.
Hmm.
And then George went on top. He said the corners were rounded, which surprised Alfred
That's
because that takes a
incredible.
little more effort, I guess.
Have you
Right,
seen
right.
the replica in, I think it's Kentucky, is it?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
my
Ark
buddy's going
Encounter.
there next weekend.
I went there with Alfred
Wow.
Lee.
Oh wow.
I know.
Now, do they have it now?
Wow.
That area there in Kentucky, do they have a different idea of where Noah's Ark is?
I
I
don't know
think
if they have a
that's what I've
different
heard.
idea, but they have a different idea of what it looks like.
Okay.
Interesting.
I had
Yeah.
Alfred, I've got a video of Alfred sitting there right across from it, sitting in one of those chairs that they have out there, right there. And I said, Alfred, tell me what you think about the design of this ark as it pertains to the eyewitness accounts that you have encountered. And the first thing he said was, they did a magnificent job. He said, but Ed Davis and George Agopian both said this. And he described the ark according to the eyewitnesses. It didn't have a fantail. It didn't have this other thing on the front. The boards, he said this off camera. The boards were too thin. They were wider, he said. I don't know how he found that out.
Wow.
I don't know how that detail came into the discussion.
Right.
But
Interesting. Yeah.
Alfred even knew how wide the boards were. When the Russians went there in 1916, and all that information was destroyed because the Bolshevik Revolution took place right after, the Russians said that they saw the door laying on the ground, and they measured it being 20 by 20 feet.
Wow.
I figured it was 2 feet thick. I did a video on this, and I came up with 12,600 pounds was the door.
Wow.
I don't think
I
it was
remember
on
hearing about them finding Noah's chair and his bed is just abnormally large.
That is, if I'm understanding this correctly, that's exactly right. And when Ed Davis went there in 1943, his guide, the locals, told them this is what Ed, okay, hold on. Here's Ed Davis drawing his memories in front of Alfred Lee in 1986. Okay? Alfred is drawing right there. The ark. And this is what they came up with. The ark was in two pieces.
Hmm.
And this is right there is the glacier melting and going over the side of the mountain.
Now, does it say in the Bible that it broke in half at one point, or
No,
it doesn't say anything
no,
about it?
it
It
was
just says it
intact until he
sets.
saw it in 1943 like this. George Agopian in 1902 and 4 said it was intact. It was up on a ledge and it came down 100 feet off the ledge and then encased in the glacier and then snapped in two. But he was 800 yards from it. Ed Davis was, but he could see inside.
And where was this again?
This was 15,000 feet north side of Mount Ararat.
Ararat, right? Okay.
When he talked to the
Interesting.
locals who had been in on the third floor where the furniture is, they said the furniture was extraordinarily large.
So people were big. We can kind of draw that conclusion a little bit, right? Obviously things get watered down, right, in genetics and as time goes on.
Right.
Which I can see that.
It's
Sure.
incredible the technology that they used and how they built the boat. I was listening to one of my clients talk about how the windows were specifically perfectly designed for the sun to come into all the bays, and the water treatment system where they would catch the rainwater and filter it somehow and it would run into their basins. It's incredible.
That's the IQ, man. The IQ
Yeah,
was a lot better than it is today. I
it
mean,
Well, we're
must have
going to
been.
see
drastically.
once we get on board, we're going to be able to see what did the drainage, what did the feeding system look like, what did the water system look like. We're going to be able to see at firsthand what they did. And let me tell you what I believe is you're going to see. What you're going to see is super intelligence at work designing this, meaning that it's going to be simpler than we would have imagined, and not in a rudimentary way, but in an ingenious way. That's what happens when you translate super intelligence into, like, I was at Machu Picchu and I was at Cusco in Peru, and I saw those anti-earthquake walls without any mortar, any reinforced steel. That's what they
Wow.
did. And those I took a metal spacer gauge. You know what I'm talking about? Like a spark plug gap.
Yep. Yep.
And I have a video of me doing this. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I showed it on video. I took 9/100ths of a millimeter spacer when I was at Machu Picchu. And these blocks, they weren't the largest blocks, but they were a good couple of tons each. And I tried to stick it in between, and I took the camera and I went like this. I
Mm.
couldn't get it in there more than a millimeter, all the way up and down the rock.
Hmm.
9/100ths of a millimeter.
Now, have you seen the video where the guy takes the spoon and he kind of places it in this pillar and the spoon kind of just wobbles like this? Is that the kind of anti-earthquake structure you're talking about? Like,
Okay. So my understanding is, I don't think so.
okay.
What the people there said was, and this is where I first heard it, is that first off, in order to make it anti earthquake proof, you got to have large blocks to begin with, larger blocks than anybody wants to deal with today. Number two, you got to have them fit oddly, and because the pressure is distributed in such a way, and you have to make them rounded as they come out, as they go in. There's where they meet, and then they come out a bit. For some reason, that also, and I don't know the science behind it, but those three things were necessary to make them anti earthquake. I guess the Earth was still settling down after the worldwide flood, and they knew about earthquakes. It was still kind of, or they wouldn't have had to do that, I guess. It's a thought.
Right, right, right. Yeah, it's wild. Even it's the whole Noah's Ark thing. I mean, even there's towns around the area that the meaning to the name of their towns
Yes.
gives off, context clues of,
Yeah.
yeah, the Bible's right here, folks.
Right.
Like the town of eight, or uh, something along the lines of the bird can't land on water or something like that,
No,
right?
no,
'Cause
you're right. He used certain birds for certain jobs that he knew that they would do. It was very calculated.
right, right. Now they claim to have found what's possible to be the anchors
Oh, those
of,
anchor stones.
yeah. Now it looks like there's a bored hole right through it, which I'm like, how back in the day did they didn't have drills, but even I don't even know if there's really a drill,
I saw that.
in your household to do that
No,
nowadays.
no.
A
Yeah,
couple
that's
Yeah.
theories
crazy. I
about
saw that. It
those.
was like how thick was that stone? It was like 12 feet wide or something.
It's
Yeah, it
it's
was
it's
big. They're big.
wild,
They're
yeah.
heavy.
I think it had 8 crosses on it as well, or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they think they're
what's
anchor.
your theory with all that?
I think that they're not anything to do with the Ark. I think that
Okay.
when they tank tested this thing, at the Naval Test Tank facility, which is the Scripps Oceanographic Institute, they took Alfred Lee's drawings when they made the movie In Search of Noah's Ark, which is approximately this, and they built a large ark, and they took it to the test tank place and they tested it. And what they found was, and this is without any drag stones or anchor stones or any of that, and it's very possible that they could have been used, but not to stabilize the ship. Because when they test tanked this thing, it was able to withstand waves up to 200 feet, and it could pitch and yaw up to 90 degrees without tipping over. And on its own, and this is what they thought was very remarkable, on its own, it would turn into the waves and maintain that.
No way.
Yeah. I was in the Navy,
Dude.
so I know what it means to be in the waves. That's when you got, believe it or not, smoother sailing. You go sideways or any kind of angle to the waves, that's when it starts to roll a ship.
Yeah, water's powerful, man. It'll mess you up. Those waves will mess you up. I
Yeah,
remember
my
we were coming into an inlet one time down here in South Florida. That's where I'm from. But and it was real choppy, man. There was a wave that got behind us and it was getting ready to flip us forward, but I believe he knew what he was doing, and he bucked it down and let that wave kind of come under us because it was gonna like fly us forward, dude, right into rocks. And it was like
Ooh.
mm,
one of the scariest times of my life, man. That's just maybe like a 5-6 foot wave.
That's
Right.
it.
coming
Oh
into an
man.
inlet.
They did
Right. Yeah.
remark though that there wouldn't be 200-foot waves in the ocean. A lot of things are absorbed pretty much, unless you get to right around the tip of South America. Then all bets are off, I guess.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
got 40-foot waves down there sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I was just
But
going to say my brother was in the Navy too, and he talked about there's I think it's Northern Africa where
yes,
it's called something where everybody's just throwing up. Like it's just brutal. They're just throwing up all over the place.
we came back from Japan to Hawaii, and it was the only time I got seasick. And for 25 hours, and let me tell you something. When you cannot find relief from the upset stomach for 25 hours, it sucked
Goodness.
so bad. Even when you throw up, which I did after I ate blueberry pancakes, it's like
Oh man.
I wiped my eyes, and I know this is kind of gross, but I wiped my eyes and I laughed because I didn't feel any better.
That's funny.
It was really bad.
Oh man.
Half the crew was ill,
Yeah.
and
How long were you in the Navy?
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And
Yep.
you traveled the world, obviously, within
For
the 4
six
years?
months, we went from San Diego to Hawaii to the Philippines, Japan, Korea. Yeah.
Gotcha. No,
Yep.
that's pretty cool. Interesting stuff, man. The Noah's Ark stuff, I didn't obviously there's the things that are pushed on TikTok and these little 6-second clips or 30
Yeah.
second clips or whatever that grasp the attention of people who are ignorant of things. But all that stuff is interesting, man. I like it. I like it.
Me
You're bringing a
too.
different perspective here than I've ever heard with a few things, and I love it.
Hmm.
I
So
love it.
Yeah,
let
it's
me
really
tell you the
interesting.
book. Let me tell you the book that puts it all together. Secrets of the Lost Races by Rennie Neuerbergen. Secrets of the Lost Races by Rennie Neuerbergen. He's a journalist. And he also interviewed George Agopian too. And he talks about ancient technology, a little bit about giants, Noah's Ark, and putting it all together as a student comes into his office and says, did aliens really have something to do with technology and the development of us? And he leans back in his chair and the book begins, the explanation.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to
That
look
is
that
awesome.
up.
It
My
is.
my
I've read the book
Amazon
5 times.
card.
It's the best book I've ever read on this
Really,
subject.
really.
Wow.
I like
Yes.
that. I like that.
I'm gonna get the
Seems like a
audiobook
nice,
if there is
easy
one.
Get one
read.
for Graham Hancock, would you? Because this would piece together those pieces in a different way that would give him,
Wow.
I think, more satisfaction and also put some closure on some things.
Sure,
Wow.
And I don't mean
sure.
that arrogantly at all. And
Right.
I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but truthfully, it really would. It would be reorientating, but there would also be a God involved, you know,
Right,
Mm.
right. I
more
mean,
directly.
people will they'll get it. They'll get it someday.
And somebody say, well,
Um,
what's so important about this? I just find it fascinating. And if the pieces that I have are as close as we can to piecing it together, it's a fascinating story. It brings clarity and to Genesis. It fills it in, and it makes it more real. And it's just got a cool factor to it. Period. You know,
I
is it
know.
a salvation thing? No, but I will say this. If you don't believe in a 7 day literal creation, you could be limiting yourself as to how God works in salvation. If he speaks a cat or grass into existence instantaneously, and then he can heal a man's hand by saying the same creative word, stretch forth your hand, or Peter, come, when he was on the water. Command me, he said, right? Remember that? He said Peter would not get out of the boat until he got the word to command him, just like when that word said, let there be light. He
Right.
had to have that creative word give him the ability to come to him. So that's the reason why he asked him. And when he said, Peter, come, that's when the magic, so to speak, happened. So then when the Bible says, be ye perfect, that's a command. That's the ability. That's the same creative force. So if you don't believe that God created in 24 hours what he did in one day, then when it comes to salvation and this concept perhaps comes up you'll be more apt to say, I'll stick with the hand being healed, but and the servant being healed by the by the centurion, but
Right, right.
I can't go in that direction for any kind of powerful word that actually does something inside and to me to
Yeah,
that
yeah.
degree in
Right.
that way.
Yep, yep. People will always put limits on God, man. Somehow, and I think it's just because the human nature can't really understand
Sure.
the full power of God. I mean, he rose from the grave. He conquered death, right? So there's really nothing um, that he can't do. I wanted to get your take because you mentioned this little earlier here, and you've got it on your shirt. Aliens. What's your perspective on aliens in our day today? I personally don't believe in aliens. I don't think that they are aliens. I think a lot of this stuff, stems from an occult, interdimensional entity realm. But
Yeah, they're all starting to get their muscles to come out and say this. I said it in 2020 or 2021. I did a short video on TikTok about it. And I said, what are these points of light that are flitting about, that we think are alien spacecraft, the UFOs? Let's take a closer look at it. And basically I said that even Satan can come as an angel of light. Those are Satan's angels that are doing those things. They're even the experts say that there's no way that flesh and bone can be in there because the G forces would be just impossible to be able to navigate. But they will say, and these are not religious people, there's an intelligence involved. And there's also like a rendezvous point that only 3 people know in the Navy when they're flying their jets. The thing shows up there after it's been running around and playing games with the Navy. And that rendezvous point, which is like 60 miles away, they go there. Nobody knows where this is, and it's there waiting for them. Of course it is. If somebody says something or shows something on a screen, they can find that out easily. And so that's what it is. And I think Bigfoot is the same thing too. I think it's just out of our grasp, and it does not fit in with the creation model. Bigfoot does not at all. If you ask somebody who's seen a Bigfoot, if they saw a Bigfoot, absolutely 1000%, I believe they saw a Bigfoot. Now, what it is not what they saw, but they saw it. They're convincing. They're not lying. Same thing with alien abduction. Alien abduction, somebody once said to me, it sounds like demon possession. Some of the same characteristics. And I'm like going, it's interesting. Uh, I think it's all satanically inspired. And I think either it's just to get us off kilter, or there might be a crescendo to all this as Earth's history winds down. I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
right, right. No, I'm with you on every single one of those points, and I do think the alien abduction theory has a lot to do with some sort of astral projection where you're like in this conscious state, but you think everything
Right.
is real. But really, that's kind of a lot of things that show a lot of connections with both sleep paralysis and a bunch of other things where you're kind of like in this state where you're just
Astral
it's
projection and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
I don't put it past them to be able to do something like that.
oh yeah,
People have had deja vu. I mean, religiously speaking, deja vu, where they had a past life and they were able to quite
right,
articulate what that was. And there's
right.
a lot of things like that. I throw it in that category because, God doesn't work like that from the way I see it, at least. And a lot of deception. And everybody has a certain flavor. Some people are into gambling, some people care less. Some people are into drinking, some could care less. So, it's like tailor made.
Right, right. And the occult is very fascinated, and they cleave to that state of mind where
Yeah.
you're and because there's a lot of drugs involved, right? There's this like altering of consciousness where some sort of veil is opened up or a doorway, whatever it is. I think the lights in the sky have a lot to do with the conscious aspect of it that you brought up. I mean, me and Jesse even have an experience one time, before we kind of just decided to close the book, that chapter in our lives, and move on, cleave to the Lord because we were out in a way like trying to find a UFO. This was like years ago back in Las Vegas, and this thing popped up consciously, just
Hmm.
like
Interesting.
we
I
were
was coyote
expecting
calling
it.
it. I was coyote calling because you coyote call out in the desert and they'll call back and it's fun to do. But right when I started coyote calling, this thing just popped up out of nowhere on the top of the mountain, and it's a big bright white light ball, and I was like, that's probably somebody out here with their drone, and it was kind of moving like a drone at first, but then it's almost like it was like conscious. It felt like it was looking at us, and then it slowly descended and came at us, and my son freaked out, started screaming, so we booked it, we
Yeah.
left. But
Yeah, it
I've
was
seen a
weird.
lot of stuff out here. I've seen plenty other encounters with possibly even a dog man or a Bigfoot with big red eyes throwing rocks at me in the same
Yep.
basin. So, it's just, yeah, it's one of those things that I don't know what it is. I tend to think that everything that I've seen is military. That's my perspective
Hey,
on it,
I throw that right in there too, as far as possible,
right?
possibility. Sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Yep.
And the only reason I think that is because look where I live. I live in Las Vegas, and where are these things? Like, what location am I seeing these things? They're all in the same location. There's Edwards Air Force Base not too far. I'm completely surrounded by Area 51 pretty much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the military is also not only fond of but very involved in the occult. Like there's little sections of the military. We know this by some projects that were disclosed with the Freedom of Information Act and all this kind of
Okay.
stuff. They're dabbling in it. I'm sure they've got their witches and warlocks and doing whatever. It's very similar to kind of like what had going on. I think that's another reason too why he had just the technological advancement over the rest of the world at that point. It's interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, but he made a big mistake when he went after Russia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was watching a World War II show, okay? And quite honestly, up to that point, I was not clear on all the different things that took place, okay, in order. And all of a sudden, he's going along and he's doing really good as far as his taking over places. And all of a sudden, he turns to Russia, and I'm like going, "What are you doing?" It was
Right,
almost like
right.
I'd never knew this the way it went down. I knew that he had conflict with Russia, but I didn't know how he went about that. I said, "You're nuts, man. What are you thinking? You're going to thin out your resources?" And then you hit the snow, and you weren't even anticipating that. Ah, bad move.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But God's got it under control, and
He
that's a good
does.
thing.
He does, man. He does. He definitely, definitely does. What are your thoughts with the alien disclosure involved in government
Well,
right now?
it seems like it's gone from conspirators wackos to colonels and astronauts and high-ranking military Russian people and everybody coming out and starting to say that there's something here. We're we're seeing things and they're trying to put a face on it. But when I said in my video, and is that one of the videos, they will never figure it out because in order to figure it out, you've got to bring in the spiritual element, and that isn't science. So they will never figure it out. They
Right.
will
I
not.
agree
They
with that.
can't.
Right. They're just going to be they're the ones getting played in a way, you know.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
we Christians are way more grounded on the subject than they will ever be, you know.
That's correct. And I
Um,
understand that's a handicap. And Satan will take advantage of that big time and already is. So
yeah.
they'll describe it. It's an intelligence, but there can't be anything in there because it can't it's describing a fallen angel as an angel of light. That's what they're doing when they try to put a face on this thing. You know,
Right.
it
Right.
knows where we're going to go. It can't be anything flesh and blood in there because it can't take the G forces because of the way it moves. And there's an intelligence you can tell in the way it reacts and acts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
Absolutely. I know.
bingo.
Yep, yep, yep. Oh man. Well, we're reaching we got about 10 minutes left of the show. Is there
Okay.
anything else you wanted to talk about?
We could go on for a while.
Yeah. I hear you. Maybe part two.
Part two would be fine. We can, hit on some other
Yeah.
subjects that perhaps we haven't hit. And there's a lot more show and tell I could do too.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah,
Speaking about show and
definitely.
tell, I wanted to ask you real quick.
Yeah.
I saw a guy. I don't think it was you.
Okay.
This is a while ago, a few years ago. I saw a guy holding finger bones. I'm not
Yes.
sure what they're called, but
Yeah.
these finger bones were like 3 or 4 inches long. What do you think about all that?
The
You know
finger
what I'm
bone,
talking about?
yeah, the finger, I know exactly where it's Ron Wyatt and Ron Wyatt's
Okay.
wife. She
Okay.
has it.
Right.
And one of the bones that you saw, I ended up finding out that it was a bear bone. It wasn't a human bone.
Oh, dang.
But I had a friend who was a cinematographer. His name is Terry Benedict. He worked on Terminator as an underling, and he went on to make a couple of good documentaries. He went to visit her in like 2005, 6, something like that. He said, John, she's got what looks like giant female finger bones, not just
Wow.
one bone, but a whole series of bones.
Mm.
And to him, and he's an intelligent person, but he felt that was some merit to it. I have seen maybe a photograph of it, but nothing more than that. So
Hmm.
I don't know what she really has. She may have.
Interesting.
Yeah,
But that one
Interesting.
thick one from Ron Wyatt, that was a bare bone.
that's what I heard.
Oh,
I even had somebody
Uh,
do a replica of it so I could have it to show. And somebody said, John, it's a
ah,
bare bone. It's
that's
a
oh
rough.
bare
man,
toe bone or something like that, or I don't know.
so upsetting.
I
Oh
know.
man, that
I want it to be a
stinks,
giant bone.
I had a
right?
feeling you were going to say something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, yeah. So
yeah. You have to always kind of cross-examine everything.
you do.
You know.
Creationists are very excited about these things, and sometimes they jump too quick. And because, there seems to be, other than reinterpreting the evidence that evolutionists are using, the more direct or more specific things like giants and like, you know, um, maybe having a dinosaur and a human in the same strata, like next to each other, or whatever,
Hmm.
they just don't show up for whatever reason.
Yeah. I guess I could end on this question here. So, in the paleontology aspect of things, how much of these fossils, from your understanding, are found in their full form, like where we totally see the entire buildup of a triceratops, of this, that, or is it more along the lines where, like when you said earlier, they find a few bones of the mandible, they end up 3D printing the rest of the
Right.
structure.
I do not have a very clear, comprehensive overview of that answer to that question. I can only tell you that when I was reading a book in the early 2000s, Bones of Contention, it was called, he said that up to that point, they have only found fossilized individuals, human individuals, which include one bone equals one individual. Okay. He didn't give the ratio or percentage of intact, but he just said there was about 8,000 people. That's all they found up to that point.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Wow.
And I think that more so than not, it's scant. I mean, when Lucy was found, they found a piece of her over here and a piece of her way over there. And,
Oh, wow. I
you
didn't
know,
know that. I thought
yeah, they didn't
they
find
found
it
her
all right
frozen, I
there.
thought.
She's like 40% complete, but you'd have to read up on it. I'm not real well versed
Mhm.
on how Lucy was constructed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But,
I
but
find
you
it
know what?
interesting that they named her Lucy. I
Yeah,
mean,
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was playing when they found part of her or something.
okay.
Mhm.
That's why.
Gotcha.
What's interesting is if anybody out there that does do a little study on Lucy, pay attention to the pelvis and what they did to get her pelvis uh, intact. A lot of these bones are found crushed, and then they gotta just like bring them back to life. And I don't know this. I don't know the field of it, so I can't go any further than that. I just know that when her pelvis was crushed, they tried to piece it together, and they had a hard time doing it. And when they did, and again, forgive me, it wasn't really coming together in such a way that would show her erect. So they cut a piece of it off to get it to come together. And it just so happened to be at the angle that they wanted it to. Um, look into that. That is probably one of the more fascinating parts or controversial parts of her, because if she's standing upright, okay, versus hunched over, that tells us a little bit of something about what it might be. And some people think that it's just an ape.
Mm,
Gotcha.
And some of
interesting.
these
Makes
apes have
sense.
teeth that are not ape-like. They're
Right.
a little bit more human-like. And I don't know what to do with all that, but when you're looking at this, be prepared to understand that some of these apes had more human-like teeth. And it doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that they were more human. It's just that they happen to be that way. Or if you're an evolutionist, could mean that it was a transition,
Right, right,
So,
right.
Interesting.
But why are the apes still here then, right? Like I don't know.
yeah.
That's
Well,
exactly what
they
I
got
say
I mean, I
too.
can get that. I can
everything.
get that.
So,
Yeah.
That's the
everything.
one thing I say too. And I'm sorry to do this to you. I just want to ask this one quick question.
Sure.
You know who John Reeves is?
No.
I think it's John Reeves. He's the guy that's been going on Joe Rogan that lives in Alaska. He started gold mining and started finding the mammoth bones.
Okay.
Okay, and he finds all these just massive amount, even saber tooth. He finds these just an incredible. It's almost like a graveyard. It's in like this 5 acre square lot that he's finding these, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that think that it's like wash away.
It's in
It's
the
like
permafrost. I have a contact in Yakutsk, Russia, and that's what they do. They go out into the tundra and they go and they hose down the permafrost
right,
and they pull
exactly
all
what he
these
does.
bones out. Yeah.
So what do you why do you think that all these bones are in the same spot? Is really what I'm asking. Yeah,
It really is mysterious. How did
yeah,
they freeze
weird.
so quickly? I asked
Right.
him, I said, do you find them ever standing up in ice? He said, no, always in the permafrost. I said, what do you think killed them? And this guy doesn't claim to be a Christian or nothing. He said, a flood.
A flood, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And I don't know if
people
it
Even
was
think
a
it's
9/11.
worldwide flood or some flood that happened afterwards, because there were
mm,
there were big lakes that broke open that
right,
created a second round of fossilization.
right,
Yeah.
and it makes sense because it's like wash off. If you're gonna if you're gonna drown, if these animals are gonna drown in a massive flood, and then the
Right.
wash off drops all their bodies in one spot, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's undeniable, man, that the flood happened. Um, it's in all the cultures.
Oh,
Right.
500 of them.
Oh, I
Wow.
know. It's
100
in
in Native
all of them.
American, just Native Americans in North America, there's 100.
Wow.
Right.
And the
Right.
Modoc tribe out in California says that the Antediluvian man was 12 to 15 feet tall.
Wow. That's wild. Strong boy. Strong boy.
Yep.
Oh
Native
man.
Americans and giants go hand in hand. You ask any older Native American about giants and they'll give you an earful.
Oh yeah, with all the serpent mounds and everything like that.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
that book on the Smithsonian, it is in my Amazon card. I do want to read it.
Okay.
I think it was
Well, good.
written by Hugh the last name's going blank on me. First name Hugh. Big deal. Anyways. Yeah, I can't wait to get into that because I do want to get into like the kind of conspiracy that was behind all that with the Smithsonian and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it seems like history is being kind of manipulated and
Yes.
moved around in certain ways, right?
Can I flash up one thing on the screen? If
Absolutely.
anybody has made it this far, let's see this.
Yeah.
There we go. Museumalerts.com. Got a free Noah's Ark report there. We got 5 other reports as well, too. Is there life on other worlds? 8 Goliath facts. Something on spiritualism. And all the giants of the Bible. We've got that. If you do that, go for it.
I think that's mirrored. You can
Museumalerts.com.
flip it the other way around. There you go.
There you go. Perfect.
Boom. There we
Nice. Okay. I'm gonna
Okay.
write that down too. Check that out.
There you
go. There
go.
will be plenty of people that see that. I promise.
Well, good.
Cool. Yeah, we usually have about like 30, 40 people watching each episode, like because we premiere it live and stuff.
Good. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it's cool.
I think this one will be big. I think we'll be.
I think so
we
too.
might break 1,000 on this one. I think.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Well, if I can help, just let me know. Just give me a link.
John,
Oh, yeah.
we appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing all of this knowledge and just your points of view on a lot of things.
My pleasure.
A lot of people can get their feathers roughed up if they take on opposing views or whatever it is, but not here, man. We're open to pretty much everything. We've modeled this podcast around Jesus Christ, and we model it around, just trying to come across to people out there that are not believers, and kind of just bring them into, the fundamentals of the Bible in a certain way. I mean, a lot of people are turned off by the Bible nowadays. And we're just here to kind of bring the curiosity back to it, and
Absolutely.
discuss these things. But I appreciate
Absolutely.
appreciate you for coming on. If you just don't mind, where the audience can find you again.
Sure, just go to lostworldmuseum.com. And if you really want to see the most content that we produce, you just head on over to Facebook and follow us over there at Lost World Museum. That's the name of our page, Lost World Museum.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So we're gonna move into an episode debrief here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. I want to talk to you.
Got it.
All right, buddy. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. Episode debrief. John Adolfi, ladies and gentlemen.
Banger.
Yeah, oh yeah, dude. It's so cool, man. He's got a museum, he's got a museum, he's got all this kind of stuff coming in. He's got I mean, I want to go check it out.
Dude, that museum is right where I grew up.
I know.
I'm supposed
I
to
know.
be there in August. I told him, I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm going to come give you a visit.
Yeah, it's small world, man. I liked his perspective on certain things, some things I haven't really heard of before, the whole, considering just the antediluvian period, and the alternative view of other than fallen angels
It's
mating
a
with the
very
daughters of man and all
grounded
that kind of stuff.
viewpoint.
It
You
is.
know, it's like
It is.
it seems like a more realistic, I guess, viewpoint. That's kind of a subjective
Yeah.
statement, but
Yeah. I see. I can understand it, right? And I enjoy everything like that. I mean, I'm here to hear everybody out. I love it. And just another thing too is the whole Noah's Ark thing and all that kind of stuff. That was kind of cool too.
wild.
Um, and sometimes people that are in that business, who are around, all that kind of stuff, they kind of have the ins and outs with certain information outside of, what people are shown on social media or
Right.
whatever. The public can be very manipulated with
Right.
that
E-
kind
e-
of stuff.
Exactly. We're all guilty of it. Especially nowadays. And like even with me, like I was showing you, like if you look up right now, Noah's Ark, Mount Ararat,
Hmm.
there looks to be a petrified boat at a
Right.
certain point of the, but it's not, it doesn't look how he described it and what he showed us. It doesn't look like that. It does look like a big petrified boat.
Yeah.
And I believe it is in Mount Ararat or at the base of it or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's at the base of it. So it's actually right in
Right.
the areas where those small towns are almost like located, where you
Right.
get the history of that that area, that local
Do
village
you
was
think?
started by the eight,
Right.
um it all lines up, man.
I remember when you showed me that the town in Turkey called it's a Turkish name, but it's called the Eight. It's
Yeah, the town
wild.
of eight.
It's like,
Yeah, it's
whoa.
wild. It's wild, dude. And there's
Be-
a bunch of other little towns around there too that resemble pretty much even just the biblical story. I even think there's a town there that's like talks about something has to do with sacrifice. This is kind of like what the town name meant. And that goes all the way back to the Bible, where Noah was performing sacrifices unto the Lord, like once again. So that all that kind of stuff's very fascinating.
right. Right. What does Gobekli Tepe mean? Because that's in the same
I
region.
don't know, but
I
I
have to
do
look that
think
one up.
that also has a lot of connective tissue with the flood story, the Noah
Right.
story, the Bible. And I think so because there's all these like etches and carvings of animals
Right.
on these pillars that they're unearthing. Very
You know,
fascinating.
I forgot to ask him. And the only reason why I thought this is because the pictures and depictions of the petrified ark that we're talking about, or the petrified boat that we're talking about, is much different than what he's talking about, but it's in the same region and it's there and it looks like that's what it is. But do you think there could have been multiple boats, not
See,
just the
I
ark?
don't know. I think there was one. I'm gonna be grounded on that.
On the
I
Bible,
mean,
what the Bible says. I got you.
yeah, I'm grounded
I
on
got
that.
you.
But then again, I mean, this kind of brings the whole story of there were giants in those days and then after. right? Like,
Ah,
I'm not sure if
they didn't swim
how
very,
these
they
yeah, how these Nephal, these Nephilim, these giants, right? You can whatever speculate about it however you want to. Um, we know that there was a surviving uh, group after the flood, that was outside of Noah and his bloodline, all that kind of stuff. Um, and I think that's why we see all these things just trending through antediluvian history with all of this megalithic structure stuff, and the probable cause for technology, right? Something, something, and that's one point too that John brought up was the IQ, right? The
oh
IQ
man,
of
it's a
these
great
beings, right?
point.
If the antediluvian period and the people that walk those days were just naturally bigger, their brains are bigger, you got more juice in there, I mean, it's just so much more room for people to be intellectual, and have a different understanding. And I think too, man, just like all that knowledge that was in the garden, you had a. I definitely think they had their stuff together. They were understanding things on a certain level to where they weren't. I don't think they were really. They were taught it right through their descendants, but I
Hmm.
do think that the initial knowledge, I think, were just like it could have either been a download, right?
Okay,
Or it could have
which,
been taught literally by God. See what I'm
well,
saying?
I mean, the download, when you guys say download, I'm like, whoa, do we live in a simulation? Like, that's the first thing that
Yeah,
runs in my head. God, the
it's wild.
ruler, is controlling the simulation and the creator of the simulation. It just, when you said that, that's what
It's
I thought
trippy.
of first. That's a little trippy of a, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, because if he had this language that he already knew and he was naming things, it's kind of downloaded into you. It's in the
Interesting.
software.
Goodness, dude.
Well, it's kind of like our kids today. We see our kids growing up. They know words, dude. Like they know words.
Sponges.
They know what we're saying, even if they can't speak it. You
Yeah.
get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. My son, dude, my son would, me and Christian would be talking about something that he had no clue. He wasn't even around us when we were talking about it, and we would bring something up, and he would immediately say something that correlates with it. It was just so many times over and over, and we're like, "Are you telepathic?" The telepathy tapes with that one lady and the autistic kids now, that's going viral, and apparently, we talked about this one guy too that would love to get on eventually. He's kind of he's more on the cultism side, but the Museum of Tarot.
Oh, geez.
And that's the guy that I sent you that debunked Stephen Greer.
Oh yeah, he's
It's not the Museum of Art. It's a Museum
well
of
he
Tarot, I believe is what it's called.
yeah, yeah, it is. And
Right.
and he's an occultist, believe it
No
or not.
doubt. No
No,
doubt.
he really is, because I saw videos of him talking about he was discrediting the Stephen Greer
Right.
program.
Right.
But then he was also
Yeah, I've seen him doing some other
saying
stuff.
that hey, we have the right program to consciously bring these things. So he was like,
Hmm.
you see what I got, what I found there,
Yeah. No, I
and I'm
saw it
like,
too. I
okay,
watched a couple
this
more of
guy's
his
selling his
videos.
product here, and he's trying to discredit the other
Interesting.
business who's on the block.
That is true
It's
because
like drug dealers fighting over a corner, dude.
kind of he's like, yeah, I get that analogy. He is speaking truth, but he's also, with the energy and the crystal stuff and the new agey stuff that he talks about, he kind of goes off the deep end a little bit, I guess, with that.
Yeah,
But
I think he's crazy.
you do.
I think listen, you could be smart, but you could still be crazy.
He's very intelligent.
All right,
Yeah.
like we know Elon Musk kind of falls into that kind of category.
Ah, yeah, good point.
Um,
Good
but
point. What did he?
yeah,
What was I bringing up though? He. What were we talking about before I brought that up? Because he did another thing where he was, the telepathy tapes. He goes, he had some books that are like from the early 1900s and 1800s. He's like, these these books talked about all of the telepathy, with children and their mothers and their parents years ago. It was written about and documented, but nobody cared to There was no Netflix back then, or whatever,
Yeah.
Spotify.
Right,
anyways.
right. But
Off
hey,
topic.
John, thank you for coming on to the show. We appreciate you, man. Folks, if you've made it this far, we love you dearly. We thank you very much. If you want to support the show, hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends. You could check us out on audio platforms as well: Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of the above. Anything that has podcasts on it. You could also check us out on Spreaker. We have just transferred over to a new host from Buzzsprout to Spreaker, so check us out on Spreaker. Give us a follow there. Deeply appreciate that. And but that's all we got for tonight. And y'all have a blessed night, and we'll see y'all next time.
See you.